Greetings everybody, Christ is risen. This is Mihai Marinescu, the guest on Kali Tribune, offering my proverbial 2 cents on the current crisis in which we have been involved for the past 2 or 3 months. Actually, I would just like to tackle 2 essential aspects which have become apparent due to this crisis. Of course, I just want to briefly clarify my standpoint on the main thing. I won't talk about the virus itself because I don't have the expertise or the knowledge, the scientific knowledge to talk coherently about it. I do believe that the virus is real. It is a threat. Not, however, a major threat, but let's say with indulgence, a medium-sized threat, especially at this point where we don't have an effective cure against it. But it is far from being the apocalyptic thing which the usual alarmists have predicted. Considering the fact that the usual alarmists, from starting with the World Health Organization and continuing down the line with its representatives in each country which have been designated to handle this crisis, given the fact that for the millionth time their apocalyptic predictions have proven to be completely wrong, I really have to ask these questions. How many times does it take for the likes of, Dr. Fauci in the US and the likes of him in other parts of the world to be completely wrong, to make astronomically wrong predictions and still be in office, still be listened to as experts on these matters? How many times, in how many cases of corruptions, of shady tidings with multinational big pharma corporations, how many shady characters, how many insane proposals does something like the World Health Organization need to be involved in order for it to be dismantled as an ineffective, incompetent and corrupt, rotten thing, which it is. These are rhetorical questions, of course we won't dwell too much on them. As regarding the measures themselves, the policies which have been taken, I do believe that in such a situation certain measures need to be taken. The situation needs to be analyzed rationally, and some preventive measures need to be taken in order not to overwhelm the medical system. However, I do believe that the disproportionate response, these measures of paralyzing whole countries, of locking everything up, have not only been ineffective in actually combating the spread of this virus, not only they have arguably produced more harm than good in some places in which they were applied, in Romania too, from my point of view. Not only this, but they also are, in my opinion, completely idiotic. For example, and to give just one example, why would you paralyze the whole country, a country, let's say, the size of Romania, which is not large, but it's not small either. It is, let's say, larger than a small country. Okay, a medium-sized country. So why would you paralyze the whole country if you only have 2 or 3 places where the spread of the virus is arguably higher where the numbers are higher, why would you apply the house arrest and the complete halting of any movement of so-called non-essential movements, even in regions, in towns, in villages where there has not been not even a single instance, a single incidence of this disease? Other rhetorical questions. I'm sure that our politicians, our policymakers, or experts have very competent answers to give to this. There has been some irreparable harm, no doubt, but we won't continue to dwell on it. What interests me are two aspects. First of all, the church. And I'm talking here about Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant churches. Regardless, the whole Christian world, the response has been the same to these policies. It is clear that for our policymakers or technocrats, church gatherings are just one type of public gathering on the same level with strip clubs, for example. They are a threat to public health. What concerns me is not how our secular societies view church life and our liturgies. What concerns me is the actual response our hierarchs have given to these questions. And the standard response was not only our hierarchs, but even the laity, even the common people, most of them. The response was that of lukewarm acceptance, of docility. Practically everybody considered, not everybody, sorry, a great majority of people consider this to be absolutely normal for the state to interfere in the life of the church, to dictate when it is acceptable and when it is not acceptable to attend church services, to dictate that you cannot participate at the Feast of Feasts on Easter, that you cannot receive Holy Communion during this period. So this response is most concerning and shows, I believe, the extent to which we as churches, as individual members and so on, have been infected with this unconsciously, for the most part, with this secular mentality. Of course, different justifications for accepting this have been put forward, but the main point remains in place. I will address one type of argument. For example, some people compare this to the situation during communism, where churches were shut down, the church was oppressed, and so on. I do not agree with this because the situations are not comparable. Here we are not dealing with an oppression against the church itself. The church has been just a collateral victim of this. Like I said, it is, in the eyes of our leaders, just a public gathering, among others. But there is a grain of truth in it, namely, both the communist regimes, the Soviet style, and our liberal democratic societies have this in common, namely that they view themselves as complete systems in themselves. So nothing is outside them. There is no truth, no principle, no cause transcending them. So whatever answers to whatever crisis there is to be found solely from within the system itself. As the Polish politician Ryszard Legutko admirably demonstrated in his Demon in Democracy, a book which I highly recommend. This, along with the fact that we have accepted that the state interfered in church life in this particular case, sets a dangerous antecedent. So if we accepted state interference in church life because of this pandemic, where do you actually draw the line? So I'm asking a question of principle here. Someone might accuse me of raising sort of slippery slope type of argument, where starting from a single occurrence, I am projecting catastrophic consequences. But I think my objection is valid. It is a matter of principle here. Given the fact that you accepted the church to be subordinated to the orders of the secular state for whatever reason, what makes you think that this will not occur again? We have set a dangerous antecedent, and we might see in the future that not only for coronavirus, but in the normal flu season, when the flu infection rates are significantly higher than other years, we might have these policies implemented once again. So it is a dangerous antecedent, and it cannot be explained away or justified by whatever justifications people have tried. I'm also disappointed that some hierarchs even went as far as to admonish and even to threaten the priests and the laity who protested, or even who raised mild reservation against this, saying that they are ruining the image of the church in society. I am talking about here, of course, how things were in Romania. It is a big disappointment for me, because I didn't know that the church is responsible mainly before society. I thought that it was responsible and had to answer first of all before God. But I see that nobody or a few people raised this question at all. Of course, there have been notable exceptions. I personally know priests who underhandedly brought people in, during the liturgies. So fortunately here priests were allowed to serve the liturgy, to have services, they and one or two from the staff of the church to perform the services, but no other person was allowed in the church. So we have priests who, like I said, underhandedly brought people inside, who risked themselves, their position, who risked legal action taken against them. Also members of the laity who risked to be fined with very large fines, up to the size of a medium salary here in Romania for 1 year, who risked having also legal action taken against them for disobeying the absurd quarantine measures and so on. So all my respect to such people, to such priests, and so on. The second point which I would like to address is from a wider perspective, from the perspective of the whole society. Many people have talked during these days about how the civil rights and liberties vanished overnight. For fear of this virus, practically introduced the gateway through which we have continental-wide police state, both in Europe and the US, just to mention the Western world. People are amazed how after the World Health Organization applauded the Chinese for taking such effective measures and gave China as an example for their exemplary mobilization and exemplary measures they have taken, which we all have seen how effective they were. They were so effective and competent that the virus spread throughout the whole world. This is how effective they were. Regardless of that, people are amazed of how quickly our so-called democratic nations have adopted these measures, these complete totalitarian measures. my point of view is that these people are seeing or are tackling this question from a completely wrong point of view. Namely, these civil liberties, these constitutions, these laws, amendments, regulations, so on, which guarantee supposedly the freedom of the individual, are mostly of an unstable and even illusory nature. Illusory under the consideration that the human element is lacking. And this is the main point, the human element, because even if we talk about Eastern Europe, where constitutions and so on never actually prevented anybody from abusing of power, or the US, where people take this constitution so seriously as to consider it some sort of sacrosanct, revealed text, sacred text, they have purely and simply disappeared from existence. Not that they are not, they have disappeared in reality, but nothing prevented from nothing. They did not prevent the policymakers, the politicians, to take these extreme measures. The thing is that the concepts of freedom, of liberty, and so on are not dependent on laws and on external policies, on external amendments, and so on external constitutions. Freedom stems from the dignity of the human person, of it being created in the image of God. This is where true freedom stems from. And we are talking about a certain character, a certain disposition of being, which is needed for freedom to be present within the person and then to be extended to society at large. So the thing is that what this crisis has proven is that we have become a society, we have become a generation of weak characters, of people incapable of handling even a mild crisis, of people who at the first sign of danger actually beg their respective governments to take draconic measures, to regulate everything, to ban going out of their houses. This shows extremely weak characters, and for me it is not a surprise, as some pointed out, that those from NGOs, from the progressivists, the liberal-minded, who until yesterday were so keen to extend all sorts of liberties and rights to every sort of mental deviation, for a man to become a woman, for a woman to become a man, for homosexuals to get married, for them to adopt children, and so on. They were in the front lines of those who supported draconic measures and who denounced anyone who not only disobeyed these measures but who even raised an objection against them. Any debate was put down from the start. It is no surprise that the same people who accused the states of being discriminatory for trying to regulate, for example, flights from China, the same ones were later on again in the front line of asking for draconic house arrest. It is no surprise because these people, first of all, are of an extremely weak character, and secondly, because they want to see the measures taken not to be, let's say, taken at the national levels, like we close the borders and we gather around our communities or so on. No, they want to these measures to be coextensive or coherent with their general views of atomizing societies, of further destroying communities, destroying any sort of organic interpersonal relations. It is clear, and it should be clear, that freedom and all these lofty concepts cannot exist within the premises of an amorphous, nihilistic, completely bereft of principles worldview. Freedom cannot exist outside traditional virtues, outside organic communities, outside the church, outside organic communities gathered around the church as representative of a superior principle, ultimately as representative of God. So this is what we should keep in mind. The question here is not about constitutions and liberties and laws. The question here is about characters, about virtue, about worldview, essentially. This practically concludes my rant for today. In the future, I will try to make other talks like this. For example, I would like to make a talk about technocracy and the technocratic mentality. I actually wrote an article on Kali Tribune about this, but I would like to revisit the subject because it has come to the forefront again, and it is relevant today, and I would like to talk a little bit about it to show, to demonstrate, and to argue why it is wrong, and why it is not possible to function neither as a society nor as a person starting from such premises. Also in the future, I would like to give other talks about different philosophical or metaphysical topics, but always from the point of view of how these are applied to our everyday lives, to our everyday experience. Now, we're not trying to discuss and to talk about curiosities or about lofty topics with which we have no direct experience, lofty mystical states, or I don't know what, but concrete things which help us, to deal with our lives, with the world around us, with our relation, with our life in the church, life in Christ, and so on. This is what I want. Anyway, I hope everyone is enjoying his or her house arrest. The period is coming to an end, thank God. I wish everybody all the best. Goodbye.